Donald Trump has revoked Harvard University's right to enrol foreign students, more than a quarter of its annual enrolment. Now, this escalation comes after Harvard rejected the US president's demand that it submit to oversight on admissions and hiring over his claims that it is a hotbed of anti-Semitism and woke liberal ideology. Joining me now is Sky News contributor Bo Davidson. Bo, thank you so much for joining me. This means that all foreign students enrolled there will now have to leave. And look, there are even a number of Australian students enrolled that will be impacted. Like Australia, though, US universities have allowed anti-Semitism to flourish. But is this the right move? I think it is fair to say the majority of foreign students enrolled are there for genuine reasons.
That's probably true, but let's keep in mind there's about 6,800 foreign students enrolled at Harvard. That's a little more than a quarter of their student body. And DHS Secretary Kristi Noem asked for records on these foreign students. Harvard defied that. They decided not to give those records over, and so therefore the sanction ensued. You know, the issues here are anti-Semitism, so we have to look at foreign students with respect to that. There's also the training of a CCP paramilitary group, and let's not forget that there are Confucius institutes all across the United States, including in Australia as well, where our education system is infiltrated. And I think, honestly, Danica, given the recent attack of two Israeli diplomats in Washington, D.C., I don't find this unreasonable at all. So, yes, there are many, many foreign students who are legitimately trying to pursue an education at Harvard and many other universities. But if Harvard is not compliant, if they don't hand over those records so the DHS can see them, then it's Harvard that's the problem, not DHS, not the Trump administration. So I think you've got to blame Harvard for being non-compliant, for being arrogant about it and saying, we're not going to give it to you. Because I think DHS has a right to look at those students and track them. That's all DHS was trying to do. But you're right that it does hurt the legitimate foreign students who are just trying to pursue a better education. But shame on Harvard for not complying.
Look, I agree, and you know, it's the same here in Australia. It truly is shocking. Now, let's talk about the deaths of two Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C., allegedly at the hands of a pro-Palestinian activist, and we now know the victims were a young couple who were about to be engaged. Bo, we have seen so much anti-Israel rhetoric since October 7, global pro-Palestine protests, and now it has culminated in the deaths of two people. What does it say about the way anti-Semitism has been allowed to become the norm?
Well, Danica, let's return to your first question about Harvard. Let's return to Columbia. Let's return to the elite universities that are right here in America. That's where anti-Semitism has been allowed to flourish with these pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza, pro-Hamas protests. That's where it is. And look, I understand these universities want to be paramours of free speech. They fancy themselves paramours of free speech. But when free speech turns into hate speech, and when hate speech turns into violence, you have completely blurred those lines. It's no longer about free speech. Hearing free Palestine, you might have to look around you now and see if bullets are flying. That's the problem. Hearing Allahu Akbar, free Palestine, it may mean violence, it may mean death. And if two Israeli diplomats can't go to a museum and go to an event there and live peacefully and not be able to escape death, that's a problem. And let's be clear about this. This museum event that they were going to, ironically, was an event about humanitarian solutions in Gaza. So my question is, why is it one side is always pursuing peace and humanitarian solutions, and the other side's solution is death and destruction? That's the question we've got to be asking here. And, you know, Danica, I just interviewed a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor on my podcast, and I want to just tell your viewers this. He told me that seeing some of the anti-Semitism that we see today at some of these universities, at some of these little cells that we see, is exactly the same type of sentiment and fomenting of this ideology that gave rise to the Holocaust. And he was very serious about this because there once was no Hitler. There once was no Third Reich and Nazism. It's these little cells that have to be stamped out. And it happens on the far right and it happens on the far left. But it's got to go away. Otherwise, we could give rise to another Holocaust.
Yeah, and that certainly is a real frightening thought. Look, I want to change the pace a little bit here because CNN host Jake Tapper is desperately trying to save his own skin as he goes on a book tour of the United States. He, like the rest of the Liberal media, as we know, covered up Joe Biden's mental decline. But now he says, can you believe it? He was just being polite. Have a look.
The press corps, and I'm certainly including myself, needs to worry less about politeness when it comes to these health issues. And needs to be even more aggressive when it comes to demanding transparency on health issues when it comes to the president.
Bo, this guy is like a greasy used car salesman. I mean, his propaganda book tour is getting even more farcical.
Yeah, Danica, Jake is not just a grifter, but there's a certain smugness about him. It's the smugness of elitism. He fancies himself a trailblazer. He's part of the elite liberal media. And my thing is that Jake betrayed his profession. You and I both know this. The number one thing you've got to do is to be intellectually curious. And that's the one thing he did not do. He wasn't intellectually curious. He didn't ask the right questions. He didn't hold power and authority to account. And so in aiding and abetting Biden's decline, his cognitive decline, he betrayed his viewers. He betrayed every single person that's ever watched him. And too polite? No. Too arrogant. Too ideological, too egotistical, not too polite. And then to try to twist this around and say something about President Trump, his health transparency is bad, that was asinine. I find that egregious. I think Jake Tapper is one of the worst journalists we have sitting right now in the United States of America. It's tragic.
I don't even think he can call himself a journalist at this point. I agree. Bo Davidson, nice to catch up. Thank you so much for your time. Good to see you.
Likewise. Good to see you, Danica.